Good evening and welcome to Story Time. We're going to take a break from all that Bible stuff. We're going to talk about something real, because it really happened to me. I was thinking about what I wanted to share one of my strange stories this evening. I was thinking about which one to share because there's a lot, and this one just kept coming back up. It's perhaps this should be my encore. This should be the one I save for the end, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna tell it now. So, if you've been paying attention to my videos, I initially had posted a lot of music, planned on posting some strange stories, ended up posting some stuff about the Bible. I believe it's going to be an ongoing thing. But this was what I really wanted to do when it comes to speaking into a camera. Because this is something I know, it's something I know about. I know it happened to me. And so yeah, here we go. I can tie the two together a little bit and let you know that I had mentioned that I was raised in a Christian household. Catholic, went to Catholic school through 4th grade. My mom became disenchanted with the Catholic Church, drugged me through so many Christian denominations. It's stupid. But that's what I had, a thorough upbringing in. That's what I was exposed to. So when I was 17, I had 2 pneumothoraxes, meaning my lung collapsed twice. And that situation, being stuck in a hospital room with tubes in my chest and whatnot, made me kind of hyper aware of my own mortality. And I guess when that happens, you start reaching out for something, right? So initially what I did was I went to church, but I started reading the Bible, had a Strong's Concordance of the Bible. This was way before the days of Google. This was 1995. And I studied that thing. I read it. I studied it. I took notes. I still have my notebook somewhere around here. I soon became disenchanted with it, began looking elsewhere. I read things on Buddhism, on Hinduism, on Islam, on Judaism. I started going to the library, to half-price books, whatever kind of piqued my interest, Sufism, Jainism. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing those correctly. And I was looking for something that could make me, I guess, feel at ease with the fact that I was going to drop dead one day, And I came across, I was actually reading, I don't remember what I was reading about, but the book was recommended in whatever I was reading. It was a book called Aradia, the Gospel of the Witches, or Aradia, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Aradia. It was a book by Charles Godfrey Leland. And I guess it was the first book on witchcraft that I had ever read. I figured, well, let me just see what these people are talking about, right? And this was one that was, like I said, recommended. So I found this book. I bought it. I believe it was a half-price book. It might have been a Barnes & Noble, though. It doesn't really matter. Bought the book, got it home, read it that evening. Maybe, and look, I don't consider myself, like I said, I don't like to name call. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Hindu. I'm not a witch. Although maybe I am all of those things. Who knows? But the point is that this was the first book that had anything to do with witchcraft that I ever read. That evening, I finished the book and I said a prayer. And this was, I don't know, I was probably a year or so out of going to church. Hadn't said a prayer to God in a really long time. But something about that book, something about reading it, I would imagine, made me say a prayer that night. But it wasn't to God necessarily, although it was to everything. I said a prayer to all, any and every positive being or entity, or, any possibilities, whatever. If there was anything that was paying attention to me, that was helping guide me through this world, I asked for a sign. And I had enough of these, I was probably about 18 when this happened. And I had strange paranormal experiences, if you will, since I was a kid, since I was really little. So I was aware of that. I was aware of my own mortality. I was aware of, different religious traditions, spiritual traditions, and I was aware of my own experiences that opened me up to the fact that this place might not be as solid as it seems, and there's strange things afoot, So I said a prayer, I spoke to, something that might be able to hear me, and I just said, look, I'm looking, I want something, and some kind of an answer. I'd like to know what the hell I'm doing here, what we're all doing here, what's the point of all this. And this is the only time that I ever had, I guess you could say, a prayer just blatantly answered. So I say this prayer, and I went to sleep. I went to sleep and I had a dream. In the dream, I was being ushered in to, what today would be like an amphitheater, or a big concert arena or something, But instead of, the way it would look these days, it looked very medieval. Everything was made out of like gnarled oak and wood, and it was way back when, is the way it seemed. Excuse me. So I'm going into this place with these throngs of people, right? And I end up in the crowd, like, imagine standing, you're in front of the stage, standing room only, and you're in a crowd, and everybody's loud. It was the same vibe, except there were no speakers and microphones and electronics. I saw people sitting on the stage. There was one woman who was dressed in red. She had a red dress on. She had black hair tied up in a bun, and she stood up and stood at a pulpit or podium, whatever you want to call it, and began to speak. In the dream, I remember having the direct feeling that she was making sense of like she was answering my prayer. She was making sense of everything that I wanted made sense of, but I couldn't hear her because I was in the middle of this crowd and everybody was talking, everybody was loud. There was no turning it off. But she was looking at me and she was talking, and I remember thinking, fuck, I'm not getting any of this. And the dream kind of ended with her. She had finally just kind of stopped talking, and she was just looking at me, and I was looking at her, like, and then I woke up. When I woke up, it was one of those, sometimes you wake up and you jump out of bed. Sometimes you wake up and you've had a very restful night's sleep, and you're just kind of laying there, and you're just relaxed for a minute, right? So that's where I was. I was laying, I was relaxed. The second I tried to move, I couldn't. I realized I couldn't move. And immediately when I realized I couldn't move, I tried to scream, and I couldn't scream. Now this is I found out later, when Google happened, when I was able to look some of this stuff up, that this is what science calls sleep paralysis, right? And I believe that, science is onto something definitely with it. But what I noticed after I got through this stage of, oh my God, I can't move. Oh my God, I can't speak. My initial thought in the moment was, I'm paralyzed. I can't, oh my God. And after the initial panic set in, I started to kind of try, just intentionally calm myself. And I was like, okay. And I realized when I started to calm myself, first of all, my room looked exactly the way my room always looked, wasn't like a dream. It was like, I'm here. Um, I noticed that all of the surfaces, the walls, the bookshelves, anything I could see, seemed to be almost wavy or rippling, like the surface of a lake might be. It seemed fluid. It seemed like something I could stick my hand right through. I remember as this realization happened, I realized that I wasn't where my bed would be. If my bed was here and my ceiling was here, I realized that I was somewhere about here. That's from my vantage point. That's what I could see, right? I also noticed, and this was just, where did it come from? I don't know, but I had the direct knowing, if you will, that there was something behind me that was female in nature. That's just what I picked up on, and it was big and it was dark, but it was behind me, and I almost wondered if this thing was orchestrating this event, right? Later on, I wondered that. And so as I realized that I was up above where my bed would be and everything seemed fluid, I began to feel almost as if, here's my bed and here's me, as if I was kind of doing this motion here, slowly lowering to where my bed would be. And as soon as I got to where my bed would be, I felt all along the backside, from the top of my head to the heels of my feet, it felt like electricity. And all the way, just tickled my entire backside. And as soon as I felt that, I remember feeling my finger moving a little bit. And then I remember, my mouth, my actual mouth was, I heard it, I was like, oh God. And I quickly got up. I was able to get up. There was no opening of my eyes. There was no, what you would typically expect when you wake up from a dream. It's ended. I was able to get up from my bed. So here I was, realized that I had gone to sleep the night before after a prayer, maybe the most sincere prayer that I'd ever said, and like I said, not to anybody in particular, just to whoever or whatever might have something like my best interest in mind and care to show me something. And I definitely got something with that. However, the story's not over. This is where Neil Gaiman and the Sandman come into this story. So about 3 months later, I had heard about Neil Gaiman prior to this. Knew I wanted to try to find some of his writings. I was a fan of Tori Amos, and she writes about him in her music. She will mention Neil from time to time. When she does, she's talking about Gaiman. And so I wanted to figure out what this guy was all about. So I went to a local comic book shop, Lone Star Comics, and I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew he wrote this story called The Sandman. So I wanted to read something from The Sandman. And this was after all of The Sandman had been written. So this was probably 96, 97, something like that. 96, 95, late 95, mid 96, something like that. And so I picked up the final book, which was called The Wake. I didn't know it was the final book. I think I picked the one with the cover that I liked the most, and it wasn't. The Sandman is to this day, it's the only comic I've ever read. I've never really been a big fan of comics. But this is it. This is the book that I purchased, the actual one. And so I took it home and I started to read it. As I'm reading, I'm going through. And in this story, for anybody who doesn't know, basically Gaiman wrote a story about, archetypes, I guess you could say. It's all of the main characters. First of all, they all start with a D. The main character is Morpheus, who they call Dream, and then his sister Death, and there's destiny and despair and destruction and on and on. And so I'm reading this book, and in this book, the reason it's called The Wake is because the Dream King, Morpheus, dies. And everybody goes to his wake. Let's see if I can find the page where it shows everyone going into the place. I should have done this in the first place. Yeah, here's a picture of, this is supposed to be, a crowd of people going into the place where the wake is going to happen. Here's some other scenes of it. And that's what it felt like in my dream. When I began reading this, I'm going to read you some pieces from this. When I began reading this, I realized it seemed to me that he was describing my dream, that had happened about 3 months before I'd ever looked at this book at all. And of course, he had written the book before the dream happened, right? So it was a pretty weird, I remember reading this story and thinking, as I got through it, I was like, geez, I had to stop. I was like, what? It was one of those moments. So, I don't have my glasses. I need reading glasses these days. That's great. But it says, it's talking about the people who were there and the people who spoke. It says, some of them spoke that day, and some of them were silent. But we do not need to recount every sermon and eulogy. After all, you were there. You may have forgotten in your waking hours what you heard that day, but you will remember it in the soft, lost, slumbering moments between waking and true sleep. Remember the whispering voices of the gods of earth and heaven, the piping laughter of innocent chaos, the frightened rustling of cold order, the voices of the living, the voices of the dead. They will haunt your sleep until you die. Turn the page. It says, and because this is a dream, you must never forget that this is a dream. You are not surprised when, without any gentle transition, but as matter-of-factly as any dream discovery, the mausoleum is no longer a mausoleum. You, all of you, are now standing upon a bridge. It goes on to talk about this passing, and then it says, now the girl in the red dress talks to you all as the boat begins its passage down the slow stream, and her words make sense of everything. Here's the picture that they give of the girl with the red dress and the black hair, who is Death. The character is Death, or the Reaper, would be kind of more the closest analogy I could give to who she is in the story. And in my dream, this girl with the red dress made sense of everything. It says, her words make sense of everything. She gives you peace. She gives you meaning. And I felt that way. I felt like she was giving me peace and meaning in the dream, but I couldn't hear anything. I just felt like it was something I should have been getting. And then it said, then you are floating bodiless high above the world. So right after that piece in the dream, I woke up. And what I believe, when I look back at what happened, science calls it sleep paralysis. I believe I was out of my body. That's truly what I believe. And there's a certain sensation that at least I have when I'm in that state. And it was the first time it ever happened to me. It's happened to me many times since. And I've had the situation occur where I've flipped over and I've been looking literally this close to my face. And, thought I was dead. That's another story for another time. But, interesting. And after it says, then you're floating bodiless high above the world. And it says, and as if in a dream, you can do nothing but watch. Then you flip the next page and it's just this, this ascending swan from a star. Another interesting thing about this part of the story is that the way most comics are written. If you look, there's the little, the little bubble captions, the way the words are written. It's like that throughout the book. And then all of a sudden, in this place where it describes my dream, they start with these boxes, these rectangular, every little piece where it describes what happened in my dream is this rectangular box. And then right when it's over, right at the end of that, right, it goes back to the circles, the circular little bubbles. Now, the interesting thing about this is something I picked up on just recently. I hadn't thought about it. And sure, this could all be coincidence. I understand that. But it was certainly freakish to me when I first read that. And what I realized was I had gone to sleep. I said this prayer, if you will, asking for some kind of information, some kind of sign of something, to point me in the right direction, because I was looking for something. So I have this dream where, little did I know, the dream was going to correlate with this character in a book called Death, right? So if you go back, I can look at it like Death was talking to me in this dream. And I knew that Death was making sense of everything. But I swear, it was only a few weeks ago that I made the connection that if this was a sign, if there is something beyond this that tried to give me a sign in this really weird synchronistic way, Death was the answer, right? But I couldn't hear it, right? Because the answer was that Death is going to show you. But until I'm dead, right, I'm not really going to get it. And it makes so much sense now, that we're in this state now. This is where we are. We have to deal with this stuff in this world. And if there's something after this, when we die, Death will certainly show us what's up, I had the pleasure, I guess you could say, of talking to Neil Gaiman about this story. I was driving home from work in 2012, and I was a fan of the Dresden Dolls and some of Amanda Palmer's music. Amanda Palmer was married to Neil Gaiman at the time, and I was listening to the radio, and it said, Amanda Palmer, right now, she used to do these pop-up, I think she used to call them like ninja concerts, and it was like, Amanda Palmer's going to perform with her ukulele at, was it Good Records? I think that was the name of it. It was a little record store in Dallas. And I was really close, and I thought, I got nothing else to do right now. Let me go over there and check this out. It's free. Then I remember walking through the door, and I saw Amanda, and the next person I saw was Neil Gaiman sitting in the corner, which was, I think it was more starstruck, if you will, by that. More than anything because of my dream, because of my experience. I love his writings, but the way this first story that I read of Neil's correlated with this very weird experience that I had, it just meant a lot, So, some people left when the performance was over, and I stayed in line. I think I had a $5 bill that I had Amanda and Neil sign. And when Amanda was sitting here and Neil was sitting here, and I was coming from this way, and I talked to Amanda for a second. Then when I got to Neil, I couldn't not say, hey, look, I have a story I want to tell you, and I just want to know if you can remember where your head was when you wrote this story a long time ago. And there, mind you, there's a line of people to talk to this guy, and he was kind enough to say, sure, come stand over here and tell me the story. I have to keep signing, but you can tell me. And I felt kind of like a dick, I'm sure other people might have wanted to tell Neil a story, but it was my turn. So I stood there while people got their autographs, and the story I just told you, I spoke into Neil Gaiman's right ear. And when I was done, what Neil told me, I thought was very interesting, because he said he couldn't remember exactly where his head was when he wrote that story. And he didn't have anything too profound to tell me, but he said, I'll tell you this, for whatever reason, he said that not just the Wake, but the Sandman. He said the Sandman. He said I've had more people over the years come to me and tell me stories like that, weird, strange stories that correlate with stories in the Sandman. And he said, I don't really know what to make of it, other than, maybe I tapped into something, when I was writing those stories. And that was his answer. And I had to walk away and accept it. And so God, I'm at 25 minutes. I was really trying to make this story quick. But that's my story of my first prayer after reading a book about witchcraft and having a dream, which was soon to correlate with a story I was going to read 3 months later that was written before I had the dream and the experience. And yeah, that's it. I wish I had something profound to say at the end of this, other than the fact that I guess I could say that this experience opened me up to the idea that there can be synchronicities, there can be connections between people in the strangest of ways. People meet their their significant other who they feel is their soulmate, and they have this experience and that experience. And I've had many, but this one really, really struck me as strange, as odd, and that's it, I hope you enjoyed it. I have more to come. Yeah, that's it for now. Deep dreams.